Okay, so I'm going to try and make a video about Dungeons & Dragons. I decided to make my character a tiefling wizard named Torak. A tiefling is essentially a half-demon entity. They have horns and tails and solid black eyes. Torak at first was not going to have a gender. He was going to be androgynous and talk in the third person because Torak is Torak, and Torak would like to keep Torak's options open. However, I kept referring to Torak as a he, and eventually settled on making him male. I also decided to give him a few quirks to make him relatable. First, he's afraid of horses, for complicated backstory reasons. Second, he has noodle arms and likes to use magic for the most trivial of things. Third, he's not as smart as a tiefling or a wizard should be. He's essentially that one kid who winged his way through school and barely passed the class, then immediately forgot everything after graduation. The other two characters in our group were an elderly barbarian named Red and a paladin. The session opened with us all meeting in a bar where the local village recruited us to get rid of some goblins that have cut off their trade routes. Since the goblins came out at night, we were advised to stay at the inn and leave in the morning. In exchange, we were promised 5 gold a day plus free room and board. Now, Torak is the sort of guy who would never pass up on a free meal. He's also the sort of guy that likes to use magic for the stupidest reasons, his favorite spell being Mage Hand. You know that hand from the Addams family that they have as a kind of pet? That's essentially how Torak used this spell. It manifests as a disembodied hand that he can then manipulate up to 30 feet away and is strong enough to lift up to 10 pounds. Torak does his best to use this spell for everything. So imagine him sitting at the bar with a floating hand hovering by his hand while holding a pint of ale, and it occasionally holds the glass to his face so he can take a sip without so much as lifting a finger. Yes, he's that lazy. Back to the rest of the party, the barbarian seemed to be offended at the idea of waiting till morning. Like the stubborn old lady she is, she insisted on leaving ahead of the group and going after the goblins first. Despite the amount of convincing the NPCs did to make her stay, she refused to listen and at most was willing to camp on the outskirts of the forest so that she can at least be the first to leave in the morning. To which the barkeeper reminded her that they were offering a free room at the inn. It made no sense for her not to stay. Red eventually agrees to stay at the inn, and in the morning, we get our supplies and head off. Leading the way is an archer from the village who, for some reason, makes our barbarian very suspicious. We had a few encounters in the woods, all which revealed to me how potentially OP wizards can be. However, our archer guide kept pulling a Gandalf and would disappear during the battle, then silently return with his sword covered in blood. When we asked where he'd been, he'd refuse to answer. The barbarian did not like that at one point and decided to hit the NPC guide over his head with the blunt side of her axe. Luckily she didn't knock him out, but Torak was very tempted to use one of his precious spell slots to cast sleep on her just so that the fighting would stop. Anyways, we eventually made it to a hill where we got attacked by a goblin, a wolf, a giant rat, and 2 rat swarms. Luckily I didn't waste my spell slot on the barbarian, so I instead cast sleep on the enemy group, knocking out both the goblin and the giant rat. We made quick work of the wolf, but had slightly underestimated the rat swarms. Both the paladin and the barbarian got attacked, while Torak was standing a good 30 feet away, safely out of reach, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Run away, I have an idea." Of course, they were already covered in rats and running wouldn't help, so they chose to attack. When it came to Torak's turn, he decided to use a nifty spell called Burning Hands. Now, Burning Hand does 3d6 of damage in a cone of up to 15 feet ahead of him. Now, initially, the plan was to hit both rat swarms at once. However, I ended up hitting, you guessed it, both the paladin and the barbarian. I essentially set the whole party on fire. On the bright side, they made the saving throw and only took half the damage, which is a good thing because I believe the paladin was knocked down to 2 hit points after that. We kill the swarms and the sleeping creatures and then take a short rest before proceeding. We come across an abandoned camp in a clearing. The archer then notifies us of a group of wolves heading our way. We decide to try and ambush them. Being small and physically weak, Torak needs a good place to hide a distance away. Jokingly, the paladin offers to toss me into a tree, to which I happily agree. This kind of surprises the group, but I enthusiastically encourage them to do this. Of course, they're worried that if I don't land properly, I fall out of the tree and injure myself. What they don't realize is I have a spell that would prevent me from taking damage if I fall, and after a short rest earlier, I had regained that spell slot, so I was willing to waste it on this. Anyways, it turns out I didn't need it, and the paladin tosses me 15 feet in the air where the archer catches me. A little disappointed, I waited for the wolves and goblins to arrive, where I proceeded to shoot Ray of Frost from the trees. The session eventually ends with us at a forest shrine where we can finally rest. Now, you've probably noticed that I didn't mention the paladin all that much, aside from when he tossed me in a tree. Well, that's because 90% of the time he was just rolling his eyes.